Virus inbound. Taiwan tracks down COVID cases as travellers flood in ahead of the new year. A social distance shopping spree. Lunar New Year markets hope to keep the spirits high and cases low. Migrant workers hit the streets demanding better working conditions. Game, set and goodbye. Tennis ace Novak Djokovic kicked out of Australia after a court upheld the cancellation of his visa. A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Yin Khvat. 10 schools have been suspended for 2 weeks as Taiwan's airport cluster spreads to other parts of Taoyuan City. 17 new local cases were recorded today, 14 of them from a steakhouse which hosted a banquet. Authorities are stepping up disinfection in supermarkets, convenience stores and the metro stations where patients have visited. Rick Glowert reports.
A community on edge. In the northern city of Taoyuan, schools are closed and testing centres are popping up as authorities struggle to contain a series of coronavirus clusters. Taoyuan is home to Taiwan's largest international airport, and as residents flood back to the country to celebrate Lunar New Year, COVID-19 is coming with them. On Sunday, 7% of all travellers arriving in Taiwan tested positive for the virus. And despite the country's stringent precautions, cases continue to slip through the net. On Sunday, a health worker at the airport tested positive for COVID-19.
在桃机的工作2个，一个是在发烧筛检站，那一个是我们以前现在也在进行的深喉唾液的一个收集站。到底是哪一个环节有问题？到目前还是看不出来。
Authorities are also struggling to contain a cluster centred around a restaurant in the city that traces back to the airport. 7 people who attended a company banquet earlier this month took public transport, went shopping and visited an electronic plant, the city mayor said.
某电子工厂的这个裁减我们预估要裁减1500人。
With Lunar New Year just around the corner, there is a clear message from Taiwan's Epidemic Command Center amid the heightened risks. Stay vigilant if you want to have a happy, healthy and virus-free Year of the Tiger. Patrick Chen and Rick Glowert for TaiwanPlus.
The rising number of local COVID-19 cases has triggered a response in Taiwan's business sector. The world's largest chip maker, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, or TSMC, announced it would return to stricter COVID-19 measures, including operating in separate teams to minimize the risk of whole factories becoming infected. TSMC says that visitors will be restricted from entering their facilities and travel between various sites is now prohibited as well. In addition, the year-end party in the company's northern Taiwan site has been cancelled. The search continues for a missing F-16V fighter jet that crashed into the sea off Taiwan's west coast after the recovery of remains belonging to the missing pilot, Chen Yi. Military helicopters are patrolling the crash site in an effort to recover the aircraft's black box, a data recorder that contains information about the flight. This should help investigators determine the cause of last week's crash. All of the country's F-16s remain grounded while the military conducts safety inspections. Migrant workers in Taiwan took to the streets on Sunday, demanding better work conditions and a change in employment restrictions. Under current laws, foreign workers are not allowed to switch jobs at will. TaiwanPlus reporter Bing Wang has more.
For 40-year-old Putu, praying at the mosque is not only a show of religious devotion, but an escape from his daily life. He came to Taiwan from Indonesia 7 years ago and spends most days working as a gardener.
Dan dijanjikan tempat tinggal itu yang bagus, ada AC-nya, tempat tinggal yang layak. Ternyata saya tidurnya itu hanya di alas koran, di alas apa itu namanya karton. Saat ini kondisi PRT itu sangat memprihatinkan dengan upah yang sangat kecil.
Putu is one of 700,000 migrant workers living in Taiwan, 90% of whom come from Southeast Asia. Many of them work under difficult and dangerous conditions, but changing employers is not an easy option.
Saat ini mereka itu tidak bisa, pemerintah membuat kebijakan, tidak bisa pindah lintas sektor. Kita sama-sama berkontribusi terhadap ekonomi Taiwan, terhadap kemajuan Taiwan. Orang Taiwan bisa pindah dengan sesukanya, tapi orang Indonesia tidak bisa. Pekerja migran tidak bisa.
On Sunday, over 400 workers rallied in Taipei to fight for the right to freely choose their jobs and to demand better working conditions. Most of the migrants here do manual labor in sectors such as manufacturing, agriculture, forestry, or fisheries. Some jobs paying more than others.
Over 200,000 migrant workers in Taiwan work as caretakers, and they make $17,000 per month. That's $620 US, less than 50% of the minimum wage.
In September, Taiwan's Ministry of Labor amended laws for migrant workers looking to switch jobs. Now they must get their employer's endorsement, then register through a government-run employment service. Only if the service fails to find them a job in their line of work can they transfer to better-paying sectors.
为了维持整个就是我们劳雇关系的稳定性，然后也同时去照顾我们一些失能弱势家庭的一些照顾能量，所以当时候我们有这样子的一个法规存在，基本上它势必还是会影响到我们相关的就是我们的劳雇关系的稳定性。
But Anita, a migrant worker from the Philippines, believes emphasizing stability doesn't consider the needs of the employee.
The treatment between the employer and the worker is not proper and not balanced. So we're here today so that they know that we workers are suffering too much because the favor of the law is within the employer only.
Chen Xiulian of the Taiwan International Workers Association says restrictions should be tighter on the employers and not on the workers.
把选择工作的权益还给工人，他才可以迫使整个产业界去进步，他才有办法迫使雇主去改善劳动条件。那这个东西它其实是会协助本劳跟外劳的，它会让我们整体劳动条件往上提升。真的有一些会虐待工人的，他会剥削工人的，不管是雇主或中介，他就没有办法继续做这样的事情。
Migrants like Putu and Anita are essential to Taiwan's workforce, and they hope to finally break through the bureaucracy and have their concerns heard by the Taiwanese government. James Raynor and Bing Wong for TaiwanPlus.
Property sector troubles, lockdowns and industry regulations all took a toll on China's economic growth figures, with a marked slowdown in the last quarter of 2021. While its full-year numbers beat the official target with a GDP of 8.1% for the year, the last few months indicated a loss of momentum. China's government is grappling with its deepest economic challenges since the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic. Some analysts are predicting that the slowdown will continue into 2022. China's economic performance is being watched closely due to its impact on global industries and supply chains. Another factor that will weigh down China's economy is its demographic crisis. New statistics reveal the nation's fertility rate reached a record low in 2021, with the population on the verge of decline. The number of newborns dropped for the fifth consecutive year from 12 million in 2020 to 10.6 million last year, according to official data. And this was reflected in population growth of less than 500,000. In an effort to boost the fertility rate, Beijing has allowed couples to have a third child and is attempting to reduce abortions for non-medical reasons. Many local authorities in China have introduced their own measures, which include giving parents more days off work or even financial support.
China is very hard to increase the birth because one-child policy have changed everything. Because right now the young people don't want to have children, and even they don't want to get married. And also some of the economy, education, and everything other thing is linked to one-child policy. Even China have change the policy, but the economy, education, and some other things still continue.
But Beijing's latest policies to promote bigger families have come under criticism for rolling back women's rights. Human Rights Watch 2022 report outlines the impact of a clampdown on reproductive rights and how women became more vocal about sexual abuse. Our reporter Louise Watt spoke to senior China researcher Yaqiu Wang and started by asking about the developments in China's Me Too movement.
I think it was very inspiring to me, especially, the Peng Shuai case. It was an extraordinary allegation against such a high-level official. And also, it's a very surprising thing. Nobody expected this to happen. She was a famous tennis star. He was a high-level government official. Then I think, in a way, it's the Peng Shuai case, and even, other cases, is emblematic of the Me Too movement in China, which is that they're filled with surprises. I think people, we all know that there's heavy censorship and surveillance on the internet in real life. So there's repression on what people can say, on what people can do in terms of women's rights. But despite the repression, women's rights activists, ordinary women, are still taking a stand, and they come forward and they speak up. I think, they're very courageous. I think it really says there's this demand for gender equality, for justice, that it is pent up, and then people wanted to, express, and even within this context of heavy repression. So I would say, since the Me Too movement took off in China, we saw a lot of surprising things. We were encouraged, and I hope to see the same trend continue.
In 2021, China further relaxed its family planning restrictions, so now all couples can have 3 children. But actually, in 2016, when they said all couples could have 2 children, following on from then, there's been lots of reports from within China, women very unhappy with increased discrimination at work. Can you talk a little about how do you expect the 3-child policy to exacerbate this?
Well, I think, for 30 years, China only had the 1-child policy. So for a women who go to apply for a job or get a job interview, the potential employee only expect women to have 1 maternity leave. Now, because the 2-child policy, which were in effect for 5 years, evidence and research by Human Rights Watch show that potential employers discriminate against women more because they expect the women could take 2 maternity leaves. This is one side. The other is that, because of the traditional gender roles in China, women are expected to, be the caretaker of the children. The cost of maternity leaves in China are borne by companies, not by the government. So for employers, they don't want to pay the extra money to have, the women to go off to take maternity leaves.
Coming up, we take you to an art exhibition that reveals the beauty of Taiwan's Matsu Islands. Details after the break.
这是我们台湾人要送给台湾的礼物。
我们都清楚，我们都在一起，在完成一件事情。
这是我们的根。
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. Let's take a look at some of the international stories making the headlines around the world. North Korea has fired 2 suspected ballistic missiles in what would be the country's 4th launch this month. South Korea's military says the projectiles were fired from the area around Pyongyang International Airport. The office of Japan's Prime Minister also said it detected a possible ballistic missile launch from North Korea, but has not yet provided more details. Japan's Coast Guard issued a warning for vessels travelling around the country's waters to watch out for falling objects. This morning's suspected launch follows a pair of weapons tests of a purported hypersonic missile, as well as a test fire of a ballistic missile from a train on Friday. 2 teenagers in the United Kingdom have been arrested in connection to a hostage-taking incident at a synagogue in the US state of Texas. On Saturday, an armed assailant entered the congregation Beth Israel Synagogue in the Dallas area, taking 4 people hostage. The siege lasted for about 10 hours before the FBI SWAT team stormed the synagogue and shot the attacker dead. All hostages were unharmed. The assailant has been named as Malik Faisal Akram, a 44-year-old British national. The details of the pair arrested in the British city of Manchester have not yet been revealed. Tennis world number 1 Novak Djokovic is on his way home after an Australian court upheld a decision to revoke his visa. The ruling closes the book on an 11-day saga that has seen back-and-forth decisions on the Serbian player's fight to regain his title at the Australian Open Grand Slam event. James Chater reports.
Roaring into the quiet Australian night, this plane's departure is bringing an end to a raucous 11-day controversy. A few hours before.
Good evening. First tonight, Novak Djokovic's fate has finally been decided. The world number 1 has been booted out of Australia.
A federal court on Sunday upheld the Australian government's decision to cancel Novak Djokovic's visa, firmly shutting the door on his hopes to defend his Australian Open crown and win a record 21st Grand Slam title. Djokovic's journey to Australia had sparked widespread controversy about the equal application of COVID regulations. The Serbian applied to enter the country without being vaccinated on a medical exemption, leading politicians, the public and fellow players to all weigh in. But in the final ruling on Sunday, the court said Djokovic's presence in the country could foment anti-vaccination sentiment. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison welcomed the ruling, saying it would keep Australians safe. In his own statement, Djokovic said he was extremely disappointed but would respect the court's decision. On the ground, however, a mixed response.
And there's been too many instances of people being locked out of their own state and because of the COVID restrictions, and I don't think it's fair that he'd be allowed to come in, to be honest. So I think it's the right decision.
When he came here to play tennis, and he had an exemption to come here and play tennis, he was allowed to come here. And that's what you should be doing. It's a political stuff. This is just so political.
Back in Serbia, buildings were lit up in support of the tennis star.
Mislim da je skandalozna odluka, razočarana sam. Mislim da je pokazala kako u nekim drugim zemljama funkcioniše vladavina prava, odnosno kako ne funkcioniše vladavina prava. Neverovatno mi je da...
And members of the Serbian public were equally disappointed.
Pa mislim da se Australija obrukala I da je nepravedno donešena odluka. Žao mi je Novaka I kao tenisera I kao čovjeka I eto, to je to, ne šta drugo kažem.
Djokovic too will have nothing more to say for now. After a trip down under, he'd rather soon forget. Karma Shu and James Chater for TaiwanPlus.
An underwater volcano erupted violently near the Pacific island nation of Tonga on Sunday, with a sonic boom heard as far away as Alaska. It resulted in a plume of ash 20 kilometers tall and 300 kilometers in diameter. The powerful explosion triggered the equivalent of a 5.8 magnitude earthquake, sending large waves across the Pacific and a tsunami that caused widespread damage in the Tongan capital, Nuku'alofa. Communications with Tonga continue to be disrupted by the effects of the eruption. The Prime Minister of neighbouring New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, has said there are no deaths or injuries reported so far Australia and New Zealand are sending planes to assess the damage. As people here in Taiwan prepare for the Lunar New Year, city governments are making their own preparations to combat the spread of COVID-19. Markets like Dihua Shopping Street in Taipei is ramping up its prevention measures, putting shoppers' minds at ease while they take advantage of this year's best bargains. Jaime Ocon has this story.
More than 70% of the population is fully vaccinated, and Taiwan remains vigilant in the battle against COVID-19, especially with the Lunar New Year holidays just around the corner. Authorities are stepping up prevention measures such as contact tracing and disinfection of public areas, and more than 2 years into the global pandemic, people are learning to live with the restrictions.
3个口罩，你看我这里1个、2个、3个，里面我还有1个，这里面这比较贴的啊，这个外面这个等一下上车把这2个就丢了，物品自己防疫的就买啊。如果说你去寄来的，一般不一定能够适合我们。
One of the biggest effects of lockdowns and restrictions has been the growth of online shopping. But as the festive season approaches, many customers still prefer the hands-on approach.
现场这边看比较有感觉。怎么说？对，就是可以挑选这样不一样的东西。对，我们就是有看到酒精都会喷一下，请他们口罩要戴好。
While customers can check out New Year goods in person, free samples aren't allowed.
因为我怕它不新鲜，然后口味不合我的口味，这样还是买一点点，买半斤试吃看看。
With Lunar New Year less than 2 weeks away, and families arriving from abroad for the festivities, authorities are keeping measures in place, like restricting gathering sizes and implementing outdoor mask rules. Taiwan hopes it can keep the spread of the virus under control while keeping all of the spirit of the holiday. Rick E. and Jaime Ocon for TaiwanPlus.
It's a word that just years ago few people had ever heard of. The Metaverse refers to an immersive, all-encompassing online world where people can gather virtually for a range of activities. Championed by tech giants such as Meta, Facebook's parent company, the Metaverse looks set to drive the future development of technology. Now, Taiwan has its first institute dedicated to teaching and researching this emerging field. Our partners at Radio Taiwan International bring you this story.
National Taipei University of Technology has founded Taiwan's first R&D center for the Metaverse and extended reality. The opening ceremony took place on Friday with government and industry representatives in attendance. The center is the brainchild of the head of NTUT's Department of Interactive Design, Cao Xiaoyue, who worked with other specialists in the field. In addition to bringing together the university's information engineering and design experts, it will also join up with companies such as Meta, BenQ, Yahoo, Moonshine Animation, and Speed 3D Incorporated. Together, the center and these companies will develop ideas for university courses and cooperative projects between academia and industry. Professor Cao says the center will focus on creative virtual content in the areas of education, gaming, and productivity. She says that on top of nurturing talent, the center will work with both local and national governments and research the application of new technologies in areas such as medicine. The center will provide motion capture, virtual reality and augmented reality, virtual manufacturing and 3D building software, as well as software for applications like electronic music. It plans to continue its cooperation with organizations such as the Matsu National Scenic Area Administration, with which it is developing smart tourism applications, as well as the Taiwan Creative Content Agency. The university hopes it will become a starting point for the development of the metaverse sector in Taiwan.
With its unique geographic position closer to China than Taiwan, the Matsu Islands have a special significance to Taiwanese and the history of the country. Now, the Museum of Contemporary Art Taipei is showcasing different memories and perspectives of Matsu residents. Ken Ning has more.
There is no doubt that this is a unique art exhibition. Called When Islands Dream, it collects the vision of 5 artists from Taiwan and France. They were invited to the Matsu Islets to create artwork that reveals the unknown side of Matsu. The beautiful scenery of Matsu inspired artist Sean Trudy Shu to create a dance piece that showcased different local sites.
说因为这个白色的身体它
相对来说是干净的，它少掉皮肤的颜色，它少掉很多线条，所以它可以让我希望可以让观者可以更直接的去感觉到整个空间马祖的空间，然后这个干净的身体在里面游走的状态。
Wang Yusong is another artist featured in the exhibition. His fascination with Dongju Lighthouse's history and the use of cyanotype prints as a medium resulted in days in the lighthouse. His objective for this project was to become a lighthouse keeper. While governed by Taiwan, the Matsu Island sits alongside the southeastern coast of China. Its geographic position means Matsu art was rarely in the spotlight.
比较不一样的地方是我们这次的展览的作品都是以马祖为主去创作的。那其实，在过去，甚至是台湾历史上，我们比较少有就是以这个离岛或外岛的为主体为核心来去发想的作品，所以我觉得它可以提供了跟台湾本岛就是不一样的观点。
One Island's Dream is currently on display at the Museum of Contemporary Art Taipei. Visitors can experience the island for themselves through different senses, including sight, touch, and hearing. The exhibition will last through the end of February, offering a unique perspective of Matsu. James Rayner and Ken Ning for TaiwanPlus.
Thanks for watching TaiwanPlus News. I'm Yin Khvat. We leave you with images of 12 herons released into the wild in Bolivia after wildfires consumed their habitat last year. For more stories from Taiwan and around the world, please download the TaiwanPlus app. Stay safe and see you next time.